free to turn your video on if you're comfortable, or if you're enjoying having your lunch, then fair enough. But feel free to turn on off at any point. And when we get to the question section, either type questions in the chat or come on video. But just to start, thank you for joining. I'm Kate Larson. I run Supply ES Change with a team across Asia in particular. I lived and worked in Asia and China for many years, working in garment brands and other consulting and projects, which at times were generally on labor standards and environmental and safety. But I also did a number of big projects on women's empowerment in supply chains for the World Bank, and engaging a lot of apparel brands and NGOs, government, etc., working on the issues. So it's fantastic to have been invited today to help you learn about what two companies are doing. Anna-Karin here is in Sweden and with the large Swedish textiles apparel retailer Lindex, and Amy White, I think you're in Seattle, is that right, Amy? Yes, with Nordstrom, which for those of us who've lived in the US at times, is one of the high-end department store retailers, which also has a lot of fashion and retail. And back in my days in Burberry, we did a lot of partnerships with the Nordstrom team on shared suppliers in Asia. So it's great to hear the latest on what their program is up to with Amy leading these days. So I wanted to let both of these wonderful ladies get a chance to share about their programs to you. I'm going to ask them one or two slightly pushy questions, which they're aware of. They're prepped on real impact for women and workers and men as well in supply chains, but around the reason we talk about women's empowerment in supply chains is particularly we talk about every day here in the West in terms of diversity and gender expectations on companies now. But for those of us who've dealt with factory labor standards, we still see Human Rights Watch came out with a report last year or the year before on the levels of sexual harassment of women by male supervisors and management in some factories in South Asia in particular. And we've seen that, in factories I've monitored across Asia, you don't see a lot of women management. You see some, but not enough, and certainly not reflective of the apparel and consumer goods sector supply chains. So that's why we're talking about it. And I'm going to start with Anna-Karin as our first case study, shall we say, of what apparel companies can be doing on this work. And with their supplier factories around the world and particularly in Asia. So Anna-Karin, we discussed that it'd be great if you could tell everybody about the We Woman program, which Lindex has been rolling out, where you're doing that, and any high-level results around that, but how it works as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that. And nice to see that so many have joined this session on this important topic, and some familiar faces as well. So nice to be here. And so for Lindex, we put the woman in the center of our sustainability strategy. So we do a lot of different women empowerment projects throughout our value chain or throughout our supply chain. But today I'm particularly going to focus on, as you said, Kate, We Women. And just to give you a little bit of background, we had been working with Her Health projects with the BSR for many years in our supply chain, which is all about educating workers in health and personal hygiene and so on, with various results. Some factories really took on the learnings and started, handing out sanitary pads, and they really sustained the project after, we had left, so to say, and really saw the connection between better health with the workers, less absenteeism and higher productivity and so on. But of course, some suppliers, they did the project while we were there, and then after we left, then they also left it with turnover of managers and so on. So we sat down and we started thinking around how can we actually help our factories and build capacity to sustain learnings and really work with women empowerment for real, and how can we change things in our factories and make it consistent over time. So then we thought, it has to be about management systems. It has to be in the HR systems of the factories. So we designed this program ourselves, and we called it We Women. And then we started looking for funds, and we found a great partner with GIZ. So we've been performing this private partnership project with GIZ. And it's been a 3-year pilot that we rolled out in Bangladesh, and we are closing that project now. Actually, we are having our final closing webinar next week with the stakeholders. And this program is really about, improving management systems or creating them where they are lacking, and management systems that are inclusive and provide the same opportunities for women in the factories as for men. Because as we all know, a lot of women, 80-90% of sewing workers are women, but almost 100% of the managers are men in a typical garment factory. So the content of the project is basically around, why is gender equality a business issue? It's focusing on women's safe and healthy and harassment in the factories, and what mechanisms are there to put in place for the factory management to prevent harassment from occurring. It's also about, there are some wage mechanisms, and there is skills development, and about providing the same opportunities for women in the factories. So the aim of the project, it's about, there is like a training program for top and middle management in the factories, and then each factory is supposed to create their own gender plan. And part of the program is also running a women cafe, which is a place for women to come after work to also learn about workers' rights, their own rights, and so forth, to continue this training and develop their skills. So we rolled out that program also in India last year. We've done an unsuccessful trial in Myanmar, and we were planning to roll it out in Myanmar again, which is obviously not happening now. So that's a bit of the background.
Right. Fantastic. And Anna-Karin talked a bit about her project there. Amy's going to explain a bit more about that. I'll talk about why it's still important, even when you're testing other things as well. But just with you, Anna-Karin, I wanted to ask you, since some people might ask, if you really want to improve livelihoods, especially post-COVID, when garment workers in particularly South Asia have been heavily hit with, if not losing their jobs, at least massive income salary cuts. So going from the $100 to $200 they were earning a month to lucky if they earned $100 in a month, for example, in many cases. So some might ask, why doesn't a brand just pay more? So if you really care about women workers, but you said something interesting when we spoke before today about wage ladders and purchasing practices, and I thought it was fantastic. And if you could explain, that would be great.
Sure. So as you very rightly say, I mean, the whole topic on living wage is what it is, right? It's quite complicated. It's not so easy to tackle. But one of the ways that we have chosen to work with this is to integrate this in the We Women project, right? And the way we work with it is to create a wage perspective into the management system. So what we want from this gender plan that suppliers and factories are creating are transparent wage ladders, so that it's very clear for all women, all the workers in the factories, that, if I take this step, I will earn this much. If I take this step, I will earn this much. And to get there, it requires this kind of skills development for me. It's also about closing the pay gap. So same pay for same work between men and women. And so it's about, this program is about building the foundation for paying living wages. And we think that, I mean, one of the reasons why audits, that, classic audit systems and code of conduct with audits have not been driving change, according to us, what we have seen is the lack of management system. So no, you can give a corrective action plan to a factory and then come back after 3 or 6 months. Then it's better. If you come back again after 3 months, it's not going to be consistent because the management system is not there, and there's a change of managers all the time. So for us, we really firmly believe in creating and building these systems that are consistent over time and that has a proper a wage perspective, and also putting the woman in the center of this. And parallelly with this, we are also working on wage calculations with the anchor and anchor method with our factories, and we have also been working with digital payments. So we are taking steps within the boundaries where we can have an impact when it comes to living wage.
And you mentioned, I think, just very quickly that you're also looking at the purchasing practices side with training to your own teams, which touches on this program, I think.
That's right. Because we recognize that, of course, we also have an impact on the way how we behave. But having said that, I would also like to add that during COVID and the whole challenge that it came with in the industry, we also had to cancel some orders, like many others, but we have taken complete responsibility for all our liabilities, so we can proudly say.
Done. Yeah. No, great when companies have been able to do that. That's number one before everything else is pay suppliers. But in terms of this deeper work, assuming a company's done that, final quick question to you, just if other companies are interested to understand more about what you're up to, I'm a big proponent of collaboration. Suppliers want us to collaborate more and align on standards and engagements. You said something about open source and it's GIZ, German government funded. So
yes. So I'm very happy to get that question because I wanted to take the opportunity here today to say that from next week, all the tools that we have created within the We Women programs are going to be open source. And this is our way of, sharing in the industry to create a bigger impact. And Kate, you and I had a conversation before the session around, how do we collaborate with other buyers in the same factories?
Yes.
Which is also very interesting. We have intentionally just, focused on our factories on our own and not involved other buyers in the factory at this stage. A bit selfish maybe, but it has been for speed and for our own learnings. But now we can share the learnings. And the logic behind that is that, if we can onboard our factories and then leave the tools for open source, other brands can onboard their factories, and together we can have a bigger impact in the industry. So we really encourage people to contact us. We can help you with some learnings and give you our tools, and together we can create a big impact in the industry.
Maybe you can share your email, Anna, or they can find you on LinkedIn or something like that. Thank you, Anna Karin. And so thank you. Really fascinating to hear about this sort of newer innovation. And in the work I was doing with the World Bank 3 or 4 years, maybe it's 4 or 5 years ago now, where we interviewed many apparel brands and NGOs for women workers and other initiatives. One of the points was that we do need to test new models. We need to try things, but at the same time, we need to keep working on and continuously improving what we've already got, and then kind of seeing over time which of them, as you're saying, not just which of them work, but which of them have principles that can make any approach work. So with that, I want to move to Amy White with Nordstrom, who I said have a big fashion. They have their own brand as well as selling other brands like other department stores. And so in terms of Nordstrom Made, it seems, Amy, you're at the leadership of some fantastic goals by 2025 that 100% of Nordstrom Made strategic suppliers would pay a living wage. Disclose traceability to the factory for 90% of Nordstrom Made products. Ensure all suppliers and business partners adhere to Nordstrom partnership guidelines, which I assume is the labor compliance, etc. Produce, and this is the big one, produce 90% of Nordstrom Made products in factories that invest in women's empowerment and provide grants to organizations that support women's empowerment to create additional resources within your global supply chain. So you have some room to sort of test what's already there, use what's already there, and then maybe test some other things. So can you tell us how you're aiming to achieve your goals, these big goals? What are you working on, and how's it going with COVID?
Sure. Well, thank you, and good afternoon, although good morning. I see a few North American folks on the line, so good morning to you. Hope you're having your coffee. Thanks for joining us, and Anna Karen, thank you for sharing your learnings. I think these conversations are always good to get new ideas, and I hope everybody takes her up on the idea of getting in personal touch. That's always a nice win from these conferences. So yes, I'm Amy White. I lead the corporate social responsibility strategy for Nordstrom, which, if you're not aware, is a North American multi-brand retailer that also has its own private label that is under the umbrella of Nordstrom Made. It actually is about 22, but somewhere between 20 and 25 separate brands, ranging from men's, women's, all the way to kids and babies. So we have our hands full and have for a very long time. And I think when we rolled out our 2025 ambitions last year in the middle of COVID, this was definitely a body of work in human rights where the company previously had not had a formal pillar in this space. We had sort of our corporate philanthropy and then our environmental sustainability. And then we had done some work, of course, in human rights around compliance, remediation, but really wanted to put this at the forefront of our identity because we know that as an industry, this is a huge conversation and one that we are actively a part of, but think that we can do more. And so, as Kate outlined, we think they're ambitious goals. Certainly, traceability back to the factory or even the farm is one that is a hot topic these days for those of us that have been producing in Asia in any part, but also looking at living wage and talking about how we develop a living wage strategy when we don't have one and what it means to partner and collaborate. And I think that's where some of the greatest work can happen, where none of us have to actually do this alone. And so each of us is joining this process at a little different entry point. And then that women's empowerment goal is one that has actually existed with Nordstrom for quite some time. We've been on a journey, and I know Anna Karen mentioned BSR's her projects, which range in all variety of from finance to healthcare to other programs. And so we've been a longtime BSR partner. And when I joined the company, I actually joined from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So I was familiar with BSR and that programming, but as a grant maker, had some questions about the efficacy and the long-term impact. And so that's why we've wrapped that women's empowerment goal with a lot of other things. There are other ambitious goals around financial giving, living wage, et cetera, because just providing programming was not enough for us anymore. That sort of one and done approach was not something that we felt really good about. Certainly BSR's program is strong. The delivery of it, the way that it is meant to empower women to then become facilitators in those factories. But where it fell short for us is that it didn't acknowledge that women often were not staying in the same factories, or in a 2 or 3 year time frame, 0% of the workers who had been in a place receiving that training were there any longer. And so that idea that it was a self-replicating model, I think, is one that I struggle with personally, but also that I think we're all trying to figure out. And so this year, or this past year, we definitely expanded the number of partners we're working with, and also continued to work with BSR on some of their projects to address this challenge. And specifically are looking partnering with the PACE program and CARE on the Empower at Work, which many of you have probably heard around the collaboration to figure out worker training a little bit more comprehensively. So those are a couple pieces of the puzzle that we're working on. COVID definitely was a challenging year. Our expansion of this work was slowed in the sense that we need, much like others have addressed, is we need to actually figure out where product was, make decisions about payout for product and raw materials that had been placed. So a lot of triage work to try to do the very best thing to deliver against those supplier expectations. But I am glad to say we were able to expand some of our programming because of the partnerships we've established, and then have kicked off some living wage work and traceability work, specifically in Vietnam, and then some factory traceability and farm traceability in other parts of Asia. So it was a crazy year for sure, but I think the good news is that there is a community that's represented here on this call that's going to, every one of us has capacity in different ways at different moments. And so the work keeps going forward. And I appreciate that we're always welcome back when we fall off for a moment and can get back on. So that's a little bit of how we got there, but we're really, really hopeful that we get additional traction in 2021 around those.
I love that final point you just made about this community and stepping in, and I would say different buyers and brands, because that's largely who I believe are listening or people affiliated with them at various points. This is something I guide companies a lot in, and having lived in China, a Chinese speaker, because suppliers would say it, please, can you talk to each other, and coordinate and collaborate. So Anna Karen talked about, their tools being open source and things like that. Amy, back in my days, I'm going back 10 years now, we would, on shared suppliers with Nordstrom, we would say, well, this month your team's going on the ground, great, you can follow up the compliance action plan, encourage that work and that training program, be it per project or whatever it is, and we'll be going back in 2 months and we'll report back to you, and keep that back. And sometimes with further brands involved as well, 3 or 4 or 5, I've even done it with 8, 10 brands together. And then when it comes to Vietnam, et cetera, you can do it through the ILO Better Work program, et cetera. But I just wanted to ask you a bit about the challenges there, because I've dealt with the challenges back in my day, but what are the challenges for you that we need to overcome to deliver more of this collaboration so that our focus is on not the checking, but the impact? And you're someone who can really see where you're trying to track where impact is really happening.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And just a reminder, the chat is open. So you all have your own challenges and opportunities. So please feel free to drop them in there. So as I mentioned, I came to this work not as certainly not as an apparel person, and more from a corporate philanthropy side. So I feel like I understand community development, and this feels like a tool that is about community development. And this conversation is about how do we support women so that they are empowered to support their families, because we know that if we put women at the center of development, then everybody wins, right? And I think a couple of challenges exist. One, I don't think that everybody either believes that or has seen it. And I think seeing it is a changing moment. It's one of those life-changing moments where you understand the power that a job, in particular, in our case, in a garment factory, can have over the entire community. A well-paying, well-managed, clean, safe, healthy place to go to work is a game changer for a family. But I think my 2 cents on this, and I am really curious, is I think that we have too many goals, and I think we have a lot of places to collaborate. And so in the absence of sort of a gold star or a perfect stamp of approval, I think that we as practitioners, we get bifurcated a lot around which program is the best and which one works best in which market. And so what we're really driving for is to try to figure out, okay, if the core of our supply base is here or in these 2 regions, can we figure out the top partners? To your point, Kate, is there 10 brands in each of those countries or regions that we can just say, okay, can we figure out how we're going to approach this? Because I think that we all, especially in fashion, we end up, the turn cycle is so quick, and the product timelines sometimes are so long that we can't pull up. And so that's really what we're trying to do. And what I'll say is particularly for Nordstrom Made, it's a pretty small part of our total business right now. We have ambitions to grow it, but it's 10%. And so we will never be the largest player usually in any one factory. So we have to find collaborating partners. And so trying to figure out, okay, if we can narrow the scope of how many countries we're working in, which we did some of that work last year. We published our first transparent document of where all of our factories are and what the position and the apparel that's produced in them is. So getting some of our nuts and bolts and house in order so that then we can be much more strategic about, okay, if we need to establish living wage in this region, who are the 3 partners that we can ask to join us? Or can we go knock on someone's door and say, what have you learned so far and how can we work together? Because I don't want to say we're late to it, but we definitely enter at different points. And I think trying to apply the same rigor that our sustainability standards hold us to is something that I think should be an ambition for this space. And I definitely think some of you will argue with me that there isn't rigor, but I think sometimes it feels like I could join 7 conferences on any one morning about a similar topic around living wage or working practices. And it's sometimes really hard for me to direct my team to go and do the thing that's going to have the greatest value to our overall program and goals. So I think just getting a little bit more strategic in that way, and then doing the hard work of identifying, okay, who else is not just working in that factory, because that's usually easier, but who's working in the region that has a reason to talk about the same issues and opportunities.
And I liked your other point, which is sort of who is strong on this country or region. So for example, historically, Adidas had people in Vietnam. And so if you don't source much from Vietnam and suddenly you have apparel or footwear suppliers in Vietnam, Adidas are people to talk to because they know what's going on in Vietnam. You know, and I could name luxury brands for Italy, etc. It's quite different. And for China, again, to your point, kind of depends where you're sourcing from in China, for example. Quick final question for you before we move to audience questions. So just to let the audience know, you can type questions in the chat, or you can hit a raise hand thing somewhere and we'll be able to let you ask a question as well. But final question to Amy before we move to those questions, which is just, I mean, you've sort of touched on this, but any sort of final summary, 1 to 3 bullets on what do you think we need more of? We need to influence more of to deliver programs which help empower women. And I'm adding here in wages that really improve those wages and conditions. That's the key. As you said, take that money home to their families and their children.
Yeah. And I realized that I said I was going to not talk about it as much so we could talk about it on this question. So I think some of the things I've identified, I think are the things that we should focus on. And I almost have come to believe that 10 years ago, we were actually better collaborators in this space. And that as the business got faster, the expectations got more aggressive, that it's actually harder to collaborate because you're very focused on a single brand. So I think the thing that we're trying to do is exactly what you just said is, okay, Nordstrom produces in these 3 places in a big way and can be a leader or support function in those markets. So if we can identify that, and then we can go to our other brand partners, which is something we as a company haven't done enough of, to say, whether it's Adidas or Burberry or you name the brand that we may carry, can we go out to them and ask more specific questions about, okay, we know you have a huge presence here, we have a relatively moderate to minor presence, but can we sort of get on your wagon? So I think some of that internal mapping for Nordstrom is a next step. Where can we lead and where do we need to ask for help and support? And then what I would also say, complementary piece of that is to figure out how we get ideas like that are in your brain, Kate, about who's good in what market. How do we get folks to raise their hand when they actually are having success, and when they've seen a proven track record, to say, okay, well, and thank you again, Anna Karen, but like to say, I'm willing to talk about this. I'm willing to talk to you as directly and not just wait for sort of a conference moment or report out, but we're seeing headway in this country. Come and join us so that we can almost start to that flywheel effect, I think is what I'm hoping for, because it's just such a complicated process. Well, I don't have to explain it to all of you, but the government policy.
workers leaving factories and moving around.
Yeah.
And so
And it just feels like from a grant making perspective, and again, that's leaning on my experience, is that there was always a table that brought those folks together in each market, and someone was always leading and someone was following and someone was raising money and someone was falling behind. And so if we can start to get a little bit of that momentum and just acknowledge that we can't all lead in every place, where are we going to lead, where are we going to be in the middle, and where are we going to be lagging but still participating, and have a little bit of grace for that, and also let other brands take the lead so we can sort of draft off of the success and invest in the same programs and opportunities.
wonderful. I apologize, everyone. I have one final question I wanted to ask Anna Karen. So I worked in the Women's Rights team of Human Rights Watch on a project on garment supply chains, worker rights. And, one of the strongest messages from civil society is, yes, do all this work, but actually one other really key tool is trade unions are considered by many women garment leaders as one of the most empowering tools for women workers to participate in and access to empower themselves together, and could be argued to be one of the ways Swedish women have been able to gain some of the best working conditions in the world. So I just wanted to ask Anna Karen a final question on, alongside programs like We Women, Her Project, etc. Any thoughts on how supporting that freedom of association and right to collective bargaining, those basic human rights, anything brands can be doing there? I would say the ILO Her Project. What do you think, Anna Karen?
Yeah, this is the million-dollar question.
I would say the ILO Better Work program. What would you say? Sorry.
Yeah, this is really the million-dollar question, right? I mean, of course, unions will. Yeah, we definitely believe in unions, and we don't think that We Women Project or Her programs or whatever are instead of. But as you said, they need to go alongside. We think that it requires also a shift in mindset with suppliers. And again, I keep coming back to the We Women program and how it shifts. It's about shifting mindset. It's super humbling to work on a program like this, because it's really about changing things in a societal context where preconditions are not great, right? Mm-hmm. So, but we definitely believe in these training sessions and creating these foundational HR management systems and so on. And perhaps we can also open the door for that discussion on unions as well. We believe in this direction ahead. But
your German government funded on this program, so I imagine there's a little bit of push there to encourage that.
Yeah, but
I think sorry, if I layered it with Amy's point, she's saying who is excellent at certain things. This is where Europe can shine. The US is amazing on forced labor these days, for example, and Europe can show us how we can promote that right to freedom of association, collective bargaining. But what else were you going to say, Anna Karen? Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, this is, with the union work, it's really a multi-stakeholder collaboration that is needed. And as you rightly said, coming from Sweden, there's a big movement. We have the global deal that was initiated by our prime minister, which we are also taking part in. But it's not, it's not so easy to have very high level discussions on a global level to sort of land in to the factories where we need them. So it's still around just navigating the landscape on how do we even use an initiative like that, and where do we go from here? It's not easy. We're very open to having these discussions.
Great. Any comment on that, Amy, or shall I move to the questions? You're on mute. Sorry.
I know, I had to find it. I think the general sense is the same. This is not an area of work where we focus, but I think we're all coming at it with the same approaches, that at its core, we want the same things, and the different levers that we're going to pull country by country and company by company will be different. And so, nothing to add, but agree that.
Yeah, pulling the different levers. Yeah, love that. Great. Okay, Parthiba, if I pronounce your name right, has a question. How do I'm not sure how I can unmute you, or if you can unmute yourself if you wanted to ask your question. There we go. Hi. You're still muted, Theba. Are you able to unmute yourself? The top right corner of your photo, of your video. Still muted. Yeah, you need to unmute it. That's not working yet. In the top right corner of your photo, it says unmute. Yes, maybe we can hear me now. Can you speak? No, you're still muted. Sorry. Top right corner of your little photo. There you go. Yeah. No? You're speaking? Never mind. Okay. You could type your question. You've got a technical problem.
She's going to type into the chat.
Thank you. Yeah, great. So I'm going to go up to the first question and roll them down. If Rebecca's still here, she was asking, what are the challenges in Myanmar that caused your trial there to fail, Anna Karen? And thank you so much for the honesty about, it doesn't always work. Yeah.
No, it was actually the project setup and lack of buy-in from top management.
Many of the factory.
Yes, so many of the factories, or all the factories that we work with in Myanmar, have Chinese owners, and I think we had obvious communication problems between the Chinese owners in China and the factory managers in Myanmar. We were not present enough. Follow-up of project was not great. I mean, we have a list of things that did not go right. So we know exactly how to do that.
So about engaging management and back in the headquarter country of some of these. I mean, I was involved in some trainings in Korea to headquarters management of Korean owners of factories in Cambodia, etc., about her project and better work and things like that. So yeah, that if you can't do that, it can make it really difficult. So the more you can try anyway. Yeah, great learning. Okay, thank you. Somebody has asked about measuring impact for these training programs, and even more specifically TOT. I think, Ramona, you're meaning terms of trade or train the trainer. Can you clarify, Ramona? Do we follow up on how the training is used in the long term? So, I think you've both touched on the fact that you wish there could be more long-term follow-up, but what about the measuring impact? Amy, you had quite a bit to say about this as a impact measurement specialist, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that overall, I think I agree with Ramona, which is there's probably some work to be done here. And I don't want to suggest that these programs haven't been tracked over time and that we don't know what's happening. But I think that my general sense is the industry, the corporate clients of some of these NGOs were much more motivated by expanding a program offering than finding out the impact or efficacy of that program in a market. And that is a really different way of thinking. And I know that I come from a really different, my brain works differently, my background is different. And so I think that that's the conversation we need to drive, Ramona, which is, it's not that we don't have good data about the longevity of a program or how people felt within, 6 to 12 months of the program delivery, but what's happening 5 years from now, we have zero idea. And what we also behaviorally know, not because of the program offerings, is that those same people aren't in that same factory anymore. That's just not how it works. That's not how, I'm not in the same job I was in 5 years ago. So I don't know why we would expect a garment worker to also be in the same place doing the same work for that long of time. So I think where the opportunity is, in my mind, is to figure out how do we set up some impact measurements that actually trace the individual or a community of women, much like we do in healthcare, is that we can follow efficacy and impact over time if we tie it to the person, not to the physical factory. And so how do we do that? How do we think about measurement differently? How do we take some applications in other industries and apply it here? Feels like the opportunity to me, so that we can get some actual data about what empowerment means, and are we actually seeing the rise of both those workers individually, but their families and communities? Because we all find the one story that we put in our CSR reports, which is, X factory worker did this, she did this, now she's training, and also her family is thriving and her children are going to school. But can we prove that at scale is the question that I would like us to dig into and have some transparency around, because I think that's actually what our customers are looking for, but we have a little bit of a myopic focus on finding the one story.
Yeah. And Karen, you've designed. I love what you're saying, and at this, Amy, and at the same time, I'm also thinking, but I also want my factory's management systems to improve. As well, So, and
absolutely,
kind of your focus, and we need both. We need those SDGs social impact, but we need the system that can keep working so that we keep delivering the SDGs social impact. And so Anna Karen, any words on that quickly, on the measuring impact, I guess?
Yeah, I totally agree with Amy. I love what you're saying, and I would also, I'm so keen to really dig down. I'm constantly lacking, proper evidence of what difference did it actually make. We can measure, number of women in leadership positions within the factories. We can measure a lot of things. For this 3-year pilot we did in Bangladesh, we have done worker interviews with the baseline and an end line assessment, where we can see that 90% of the women have noticed that there has been some change in the factories, that their opportunities are better now, and so on. But I mean, we all know that there are some flaws with these systems, right? I mean, you don't know if you're actually interviewing the exact same workers in end line as you did in baseline, and so on. But these are the tools that we have access to right now. So, but I agree with you. I mean, I would also really like some, more substance and more depth in these impact measurements. But for us, of course, we can follow how these management systems have worked by looking at number of women in leadership positions, for example, and so on. So
I think with the SDGs conversation these days, investors asking, we may find that some funds become available at some point to do better impact measurement monitoring.
Yes.
Fingers crossed.
On our wish list.
Sorry.
On our wish list.
Yeah, it has been for a while. The World Bank said the same thing 4 or 5 years ago. Where's the impact measurement? It's there, but it's not there, as you said, Amy. Another question.
Can I come?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, and sorry for the disturbance. Okay, this is Farhati Barahat Khan. I work for SNV in Bangladesh. So I have a question, and you can take it as a comment also for strengthening programs. What I have seen is that mostly when programs are taken for garment workers, that's mostly training. It's good, but at the same time, if it remains only with training, then programs are not sustainable. That's what my experience leading the garment programs here with SNV, I feel that wherever we have provided only training, it is not happening in a holistic manner. The change is not sustained for a long term. But when we are ensuring services apart from the training, the worker, especially because these workers, they come from rural backgrounds, they don't know what to do and where to go. So when we ensure services in addition to training, then it becomes a holistic initiative. There's a benefit, there's a value, a longer value for the factory also, and also for the worker. So that is one. My question is that why buyers and brands are not collaborating on that line, and I would encourage, from the experience I have, it should happen. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think great points. Thank you for sharing the reality you're seeing. And I think your question was about services as well as training. So Amy and Anna Karen, do you have anything to say about that? And I think there's a little bit of that in what you work on, but you can clarify.
So what kind of services would we be talking about?
Parthiba, any more to say?
Say for example, there are trainings on healthcare going on on a so when we talk about healthcare, then we know very well the quality of healthcare is not good in all the places, and there's also a question about availability, accessibility, and affordability of the services. And given the situation in these South Asian countries, we don't have a social protection scheme. Then it becomes a greater challenge for the worker. Just imagine a worker coming from a rural background. She doesn't have any idea about her own health rights. Now she knows about it, but she doesn't know where to go. And if she knows also, she doesn't know how to seek it or in a very affordable manner. So that is something I see as a challenge, and I think that needs to be addressed. And I also want to know why it is not seen from that perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a great question and something that we have been thinking about a lot. So one of the things that we have been doing is that along with Her Health program, for example, because this is exactly the discussions that we had. You know, you get this training, and then now what do you do with it, right? So we have invested quite a lot in a partnership with WaterAid, where we have been doing community interventions, like with building toilets and providing clean drinking water for thousands of people in the areas that are surrounding the textile workers communities and the textile factories. So we have just finished a 3-year project in Mirpur, and this month we are starting up another 2-year project in Ghazipur for that, so that women can have access to clean water and toilets, and to actually practice what they've learned. But of course, this is not covering all the women that have got the training in Her Health or been touched by We Women, but it's a start anyways. But yeah, of course, there are many more things we could do, like mobile healthcare, little centers, or I mean, there's plenty of things we can do. I totally agree with you.
I think backing the call for social insurance in Bangladesh was a big one that trade unions and civil society of us brands to get behind as well, so that you had that access to healthcare, as you said. Amy, sorry.
Oh, and I was going to concur with what the comments were and what Anna Karen said, and I was just actually reading Ramona's comments in the box around, like, in the chat, which was, if you can see your work, you can keep your job, which is, I think that we all have ambitions to do what we're describing here, is to, just like we might approach it in our home country, is that wraparound services and access to healthcare and to banking and to childcare and to elder care services. Like, how do we build out a community network that allows this individual to maintain their job, to earn a living wage so that they can support their family and have a thriving community? So I think that's a long-term vision for all of us, and the pieces of the puzzle we're able to grab onto at any one time sometimes are much more specific around some of the programs we've already discussed. But I think I agree with the comments in the chat, which is that if we can develop some of those partnerships and have a more holistic approach to that community and that worker, I think we'll actually see all all of our outcomes and measurement goals increase over time. And I think this is a new space for Nordstrom, is that we have been doing the, I don't want to, performative is the wrong word, but I will be candid. Like, we've been doing the things we thought we were supposed to do until about 2 years ago, when we started to peel back the layers of the onion to say, well, that doesn't actually, we can't prove that it's doing what we want it to. So let's add some more ambitious goals. Let's invest. We're hiring a couple people right now to lead this body of work. And so that I think we'll get better over time to figure out where is it and in what, as we prioritize specific countries in our broader production, we can then say, okay, now we'll do this women's empowerment work, of course, and could we add on either a healthcare or financial planning or some other component that makes sense for that marketplace?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to wrap up with a statement of the question. It was more a statement than a question, which is Hardeep Desai, which builds on what everyone's just been saying. Thank you, Parthiba, and then Amy and Anna Karen saying what was done, which is that it's time to strengthen women farmers and women workers associated with production of raw materials like cotton in the supply chain. So just so you know, some of these speakers have been going down that, you heard the words traceability, down the supply chains there. This can be done by focusing on interventions like WASH, So sanitation, health, livelihoods, exploring local markets, doing pilots, and then scaling up. Yeah, there is quite a bit of that work going on in the sector, and strategic partnerships between multi-stakeholders hold the key. I love what you're saying there, Hardeep, about multi-stakeholders. I think that's a big learning, and that we should all take away as well to even further strengthen this work, is keep bringing in, the voices of those of you who've raised them today, who really are talking to workers every day, be you trade union, NGO, however, that's how we can strengthen this. So thank you for raising your points. And I think I've hit my time limit. Is that correct, Hannah, the coordinator from Innovation Forum?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. Okay. So thank you, everyone. And we hope this was useful. And as you can hear, Amy and Anna-Karen are keen to collaborate if it looks like you have crossover strengths in certain areas, and we can have a bigger impact that way. Thank you.